What's up, degenerates? This is Locked In. I'm your host, Mason Cameron at PFF_Mace on the Twitter. And with me, as always, my partner in crime, Vishaal Gupta at Vishaal_Gupta95 on Twitter. B, how are you doing? I know that you just got off a crazy week that included the Pac-12 championship. That's right. Our boy was over at the Pac-12 championship. They asked him to be there, make sure everything was going smooth. So V, how are you doing? How was the game? Tell everybody how you're feeling.
Feeling great. Well, yeah, went to the Pac-12 championship game last week here in Vegas. It was awesome. Got a little scouting done for some of these future quarterbacks and Michael Penix and Bo Nix. Both guys looked pretty solid. So it was a great time. Washington and Oregon fans are crazy. They do not like each other, but it was a good ass time for me. So glad I went.
The Pac-12 going out with a bang, baby.
Yeah,
We love to
for
see
sure.
it. So I'm happy to hear it too. And we have another insane week of NFL action. B. It seems like they saved all the premier matchups for the end of the season
Oh
here.
yeah.
Now, granted, some of the matchups could have been better had there not been some pretty key injuries along the way. Looking at pretty much like half of the primetime games that we've had to watch over the last couple of months, but we have a banger this week. And, one of the prime times games this week was not terribly, high profile, especially, given the Thursday night type matchup, but it ended up being a pretty good game in the end. So, business as usual, V, we're going to start by breaking down what happened in Thursday night. So, just off the cuff, give me your evaluation on this one. The Patriots end up taking this win on the road, surprising a lot of people. I think 21-18. I know we didn't even bother betting on this game. And if you did, please call 1-800-GAMBLER so you can talk to some people about that because this is an issue right here. I kid, all jokes aside, there was some money making opportunities in this one, and it ended up coming out a little bit unexpected. So, New England was around 6 to 5.5 point underdogs at close. The total for this game was an insane 30.5 points at close. I think that that's got to be the lowest, if not one of the lowest I've seen ever,
I
without a
think
doubt,
it's
this
since like
season.
1991 or something. That's the lowest total we've had in a long time.
And it was incredible. And of course, that game ended up going over 39 total points. New England covers the 5.5. They win on the money line at about plus 200, 2-1 odds. Bailey Zappi, he had a pretty good game. 3 first half touchdowns. They didn't really get much going in the second half, but that's still a promising turn for that Patriots offense, who has just been absolutely abysmal over the last month. People forget that just a week ago, they had a 6-0 game with the Chargers. And most of you guys probably don't know because you watch Red Zone and didn't see that game on there like I do. And I flat out did not realize that it was as bad as it had finished until much later in the review process. Zeke ended up having a pretty decent game, 140 total yards, 2 touchdowns. Hunter Henry, a pair of scores. I know that that probably hurt nobody in fantasy, as nobody's been starting Hunter Henry for the last handful of months. Juju, he had himself a pretty good day, 4 for 90. Pittsburgh, not much to say about Pittsburgh. We thought the coaching change was going to change a lot for them, but unfortunately, Mitchell Trubisky has very little to no grasp of this offense. He has a 39.7 passing grade at all this season, 5 turnover worthy plays and just 102 dropbacks, and they failed to cover twice over as home favorites recently. What do you make of this kind of monumental swing? If we were to talk about this game prior to kickoff, I think we would have expected a little bit of the opposite on this one, where the Steelers managed to keep win this one at the end. Yet here we are looking at the Pats, who ended up getting a huge lead early and then holding on to it to take this win. What did you make of this matchup?
Well, first of all, I'll say shout out Mitch Trubisky, once a Bear, always a Chicago Bear. Dude has single-handedly given his former team the first overall pick after losing to the Cardinals and the Patriots at home in back-to-back weeks. Only Mitch could do it, and I'm so glad he was out there last night. It was great to watch. if you had that rooting interest. But yeah, going into the game, 6 points for Mitch and the Steelers. That was clearly insane. I don't know. I was trying to rack my brain ahead of the game. Has Mitch ever been a 6 point favorite in his career, even going back with the Bears? I couldn't think of a time. There might have been a couple games here and there, but how can Mitch Trubisky ever be a 6 point favorite? I don't care who he's playing against. I mean, the Steelers again. We talked about it last week. I was with Kenny Pickett at under center, but double for when Mitch is under center. If you can't score the ball, how are you going to be able to cover 6 points? And obviously, that was a huge issue for them last night. It's been a huge issue for them all season. It's not going to stop. This is going to be continuous rest of the season, regardless of if Pickett comes back anytime soon. There's only a few games left, but if he comes back, it's going to be the same thing. This Pittsburgh team cannot score the football. It's another game where they scored less than 20 points. If they're favored by more than 3 or 4 points in any games going forward, you just cannot bet on them. There's no way that you can bet on them because you can't score points, you cannot cover spreads. It's as easy as that. I know a lot of people had the under last night, and tough to lose that in the first half, given how little scoring there was. I think it was 8 points in the second half. So I think right process, unfortunate result, but yeah, I mean, this Pittsburgh team is a disaster, and they're not going to make the playoffs. It's just not going to happen.
And the one thing that was their saving grace over the last, month or two has been we thought the run game was turning around, and
Yeah,
it just has not. Now it just the wheels fell off this past week. They had absolutely nothing. Their run game abysmal, anemic, and not to mention Mitchell Trubisky could have hit the broadside of a barn. They had one target over 30 total yards in
yeah.
this game, and that's an abysmal, stat line considering that they trailed pretty much from bell to bell and needed to throw quite a bit. So
It's just
a lot
disappointing
of
to watch because there's so much talent on that offense. Even with Mitch under center, you can easily create an offense where you don't have to make things complicated. You can get creative runs in there. Mitch can move, he can run. We saw that early in the game. There's ways to manage this game against a bad New England team where you can move the ball. You have playmakers and Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, Deontay Johnson, Pat Fryermuth, George Pickens. There are so many teams out there that would kill to have this skill group and have a competent enough quarterback in Mitch who can move and avoid pressure, where you should have not been anywhere close to losing this game. So it's just a disaster in the coaching staff too, and whatever Mike Tomlin was doing on the fourth downs in the fourth quarter, absolute disaster for the coaching staff. If we're going to be honest for them.
Absolutely. And another big thing is that their bread and butter did not go through this week. They have hung their hat on defensive football for most of the season, if not all of the season. And
Mm-hmm.
frankly, to have this Patriots team score 21 on you, in the grand scheme of things, 21 might not seem like a lot, but let me just go ahead and read off to you the last handful of scoring outputs by this Pats team. We have 17 points against Miami, 17 points against Washington, 6 points against Indy, 7 points against the Giants, no points against the Chargers. This continues to get worse and worse for this team. Yet they were able to come out and score 21. Now, some of that can be attributed to Bailey Zappi playing better and then making that permanent change at quarterback. But let's be frank, this is an abysmal offense from top to bottom right now. They do not have many playmakers. The playmakers they do have are getting hurt. Poor Demario Douglas took an insanely, rough to watch clothesline that took him out of the game with a head and neck injury a couple weeks back. And now they're playing better, yet they have no offense. It doesn't make sense. And the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is definitely going to take a lion's share of the blame in this one, as much as we do also want to talk about how terrible Mitch has been and how atrocious the play calling has been there in Pittsburgh. I feel really bad for hammering on them like this. But when you look around at Pittsburgh versus what they have in New England, they don't have excuses. They just
Yeah.
don't. They have two fairly solid running backs. They have targets to throw to. And frankly, I know that we talk about Mitchell Trubisky as being a net negative, but I think a lot of teams in the NFL right now have a net negative at backup quarterback. And maybe Mitchell Trubisky is not going to win you a bunch of games, but he should by all means be able to keep you afloat through the situation. And that just has not been the case for them, which is troubling and is going to be
Yep.
a troubling sign for them moving forward, and something that we'll watch on both of them. Now, these aren't teams that we trusted a lot up to this point, but it will definitely be ones that we keep an eye on as we move forward, whether it is to fade them or whether it is to buy into some of them, kind of like what we saw from New England. So it'll be something that we're definitely keeping an eye on. Absolutely. And into our first game of the actual slate V. This is an interesting matchup we have here. This is one that you're riding on, and I like where your thought is. And we haven't talked about this game yet, but I think I know where you're gonna go with this one. And I'm interested to see this one play out. So we have the Houston Texans heading into New York to take on the Jets. The Texans are 3.5 point favorites on a road, and you're riding with them to cover that spread here. What encourages you about how they've played recently that gives you the faith to take them at 3 and the hook on the road here?
Well, to be honest, I was expecting to having to take them at a much higher line because it opened at closer to Houston -6 or -5.5. Then, they announced Zach Wilson as a starter for the Jets in the middle of the week, and this line drops to 3.5. It's extremely bizarre. I don't really understand it, but I mean, this Houston team is just significantly better than this Jets team, given the quarterback situation. We all know what CJ Stroud has done. He's been incredible. He's clearly the rookie of the year. Looks like Houston has their guy at quarterback, but the team around him has also played very well. Their defense has been significantly improved recently over their last 3 games. This Houston defense is allowing an average of 19 points per game in that span. They have 6 takeaways and 6 sacks. Derek Stingley came back from injury, and he has been incredible. I think he has 3 interceptions since coming back. You pair him up with their rookie, Will Anderson, up front, who has been a dominant edge rusher, and you have the building blocks of a up-and-coming defense that could become one of the better ones in the league, especially when you have a guy like D'Amico Ryans in charge and calling plays there. So bright future for this team on both sides of the ball. Very encouraging. And then, yeah, I mean, Zach Wilson is starting this football game. How can you do anything but bet against him? His record this year is 3-6. This Jets offense, when he is starting, has scored 20 or fewer points in all but one game. In his last 3 starts, they did not score a single offensive touchdown. He is not a good quarterback. He cannot play quarterback in the NFL. This offense cannot function with him at quarterback. Honestly, they've not been able to function with anybody at quarterback, but I think he has been the worst amongst the options they've had between Tim Boyle, Trevor Siemian, and Zach Wilson. Wilson has been the worst. There's just no way you can bet on the Jets if you cannot count on them to score an offensive touchdown. If you're going to bet on anything, if you don't feel comfortable taking Houston -3.5, just bet the, team on the under on the team total for the Jets, because they can't score the ball, they can't move the ball, they can't do anything. And then Breece Hall is now questionable with an ankle injury. If he doesn't play, it's even more of a disaster because he has been their most productive offensive player. He's the only one who is able to get in the end zone when Zach Wilson is playing. So if he's out, it makes it even more difficult for them. So I don't see how you do anything else in this game besides take Houston and the points.
Well, and you bring up a great point where if we pick up what we were talking about prior to Zach Wilson going down, one of the key threads was that he's force feeding Garrett Wilson, and that's good for this offense. Well, that's a double edged sword as well if you get into a situation where Breece Hall isn't playing and they're a net negative in the run game, and he's having to force feed Garrett Wilson. And we already talked about what Derek Stingley's doing. That just breeds turnovers right there. So that might be an opportunity when we look at some of these props, a Derek Stingley interception or even 2+ interceptions from Zach Wilson. Those could definitely provide a potential value. Another thing that we're not talking about as a whole is I think the football landscape says, you know, the Jets, good defense, horrendous offense, and they kind of move past it. Well, let's talk about this Jets defense for a second. They have, against decent offenses, have allowed 30 plus twice in the last 3 weeks. 30 plus at Buffalo and 30 plus to Miami. Now, the Texans are not as productive as those teams offensively, but they're not a far cry from one of the better offensive units in the NFL, and they deserve that type of credit. And what you look at when you see that is what the Texans have been able to do against good defenses, specifically what they were able to do last week against Denver. We talked about this Denver team being one of the most improved offenses, and obviously that's easy when you were scoring 70 plus, or Miami scored 70 plus against them early in the season. That's easy to say, but they have been good comparatively to all of the defensive units since the start of November. And yet, this Texans team was able to play them well, play them close, and get the win at the end and not really struggle too much offensively. They had some of those get away from them and unfortunately lost a key playmaker in Tank Dell that past week, but they still have a ton of options to throw the ball to. And CJ Stroud is as composed and poised as any passer in the league right now. We can talk about he's a shoe-in for offensive rookie of the year, but frankly, why aren't we talking about this guy for even more things? I know that maybe to say, hey, this guy should be one of the top fives in MVP conversation. If they're saying it about Brock Purdy, why can't you say it about CJ Stroud?
Yeah.
Like, where's the connection or where's the disconnect there? Now, I'm not necessarily, if I had a vote, I'm not casting it for CJ Stroud per se, not to down CJ Stroud at all. But that's just not a feat that most first year quarterbacks are good for. But as we can continue to say, he has been one of the most productive passers since the start of November, and it shows. And this team is behind him and believes in him, and they've been playing great football. I'm right there with you. The hook does not scare me in this one because it could be closer to 6,
Yeah.
frankly. And to think that Zach Wilson moved the line 2 whole points is honestly the most shocking development in this entire game.
Very bizarre.
Yeah. Absolutely. The next game we have on the slate is another interesting one, but it's more interesting because of what it tells us odds makers think about these teams right now. So, what we have is the Colts heading into Cincinnati to take on the Bengals, and the Colts are shockingly 2-point dogs in Cincinnati. Now, in my opinion, this is a vast overcorrection to the Bengals win last week. I understand that they played well and nobody expected them to take a huge lead against Jacksonville. I know that I ate crow on that one specifically, but this is a vast overcorrection for a team that has played horrendously. Horrendously. The Jacksonville secondary is one thing. They've continued to be an issue, and Cincinnati took advantage of that. But let's just put that into the grand scheme of recent trends. Cincinnati 1-3 against the spread over their last 4, and they are just 3-4 against the spread as favorites this season. They were poor at the beginning of the season, and they're kind of back into that trend where they are now. Indy themselves are a completely different challenge. They are 4-0 against the spread over their last 4, and that includes 3 games as road favorites. And I wouldn't put those games at a much lower par than they're going to see in this one coming up. Indy is also 4-1 against the spread as the road team this season. So not only are they good as a dog and good on the road, they're good as both. And frankly, the Bengals have not been good as favorites. So I'm a little bit confused where this line is justified. They, like I said, the Bengals took advantage of the Jags secondary, and that just won't happen against Indy, as Indy's been the 7th best secondary in EPA per dropback allowed this season. That number goes up since the start of November. They are the 3rd best since the start of November. And we've seen how bad Cincinnati is at covering tight ends. And granted, Indy doesn't target their tight end a whole lot, but last week, Kylan Granson had a pretty nice game, had over 75 yards. And I think that this is another good opportunity to target him at over 18.5 receiving yards. Like I said, last week, 3 for 75. And if you've been in our Discord, you understand that we continue to target tight ends against Cincinnati and make out like bandits because I just don't understand how the lines continue to creep this low. It's something that we put up. And a big reason why is unfortunately Jermaine Pratt, who had an excellent season in coverage last season. He was one of the top graded coverage linebackers in the entire NFL last season. He has fallen off a cliff in terms of coverage. The age might be catching up to him, unfortunately, and he has now turned into one of the worst coverage linebackers in the NFL this season. I think it was 74 out of 78th in qualifying linebackers in coverage, which is an abysmal number. I don't see any way you can lean away from Indy at +2. I know that it seems encouraging how well they played at quarterback. I know that the Bengals were, I think everybody was thinking that they were going to throw some interceptions, and we talked about that too. That just wasn't going to be the case against Jacksonville. I would 100% expect that to be the case against Kenny Moore and the Colts, as Kenny Moore is an absolute demon out there right now. He has a nose for the ball. He's finding it. He makes big plays. And I would expect him to get a takeaway in this one. Absolutely. With that all being said, V, is there anything that you see in this one that intrigues you or something that I might have missed about this matchup?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting seeing this line move, multiple points in Cincinnati's favor. I think the line opened up pretty correctly, in my opinion. I think it was Indy minus a half point or something like that, very close to a pick 'em, and that's kind of, I think, an appropriate place for this game to end up being, because this game really does feel like a coin flip to me. I think it's, either team can show up, and I think, either team can either show up or not show up. Both teams are very Jekyll and Hyde in that manner. They can have great performances, they can have very poor performances. It's kind of hard to know for sure which team you're going to get each week, especially if you're going to have Jake Browning under center for the Bengals. Yeah, it's just tough. I mean, I could definitely see this game going either way, so that's kind of why for me I'm going to kind of stay away from the spread. The total is definitely very interesting for me at 44. I think I'm leaning towards the over in this one. Definitely think both offenses can put up quite a few points. They have great playmakers on both sides of the ball, whether you're looking at Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon for the Bengals, or Michael Pittman, Zach Moss, Josh Downs for the Colts. Fantastic offensive weapons on both sides of the ball, and two defenses who are not necessarily playing the best football right now. We saw Cincinnati's defense get torched by the Jaguars last week, and then this Colts team giving up 28 points to the Will Levis-led Titans was not necessarily, a very encouraging thing to see from that defense. They needed some special teams plays to win that football game. So it's kind of hard to figure out necessarily who's going to show up, but I think one thing you can be certain of is neither defense is probably going to play all that well. So for me, I think the over is going to be the play in this game.
That's a fair assessment. It makes a lot of sense because we talked about this too. Gardner Minshew is the reincarnation of Brett Favre. And if Brett Favre had played in the late 2000s and, 2010s, like that,
Yeah.
this would be the same player. It's exactly like that, where, in my opinion, I think Minshew makes some of the boneheaded plays, but he's also sometimes the one that's pushing the ball, making aggressive
That
plays.
bomb to Pierce in overtime last week was fantastic. I mean, you don't see a
Right.
lot of backups being able to make plays like that. So if he can give you that, you're going to live with some of the negatives that are also going to come with it.
Right, absolutely. And that's with being said that both Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce had great games last week, both going over 100. They really do attack the ball down the field, and that could be an issue for Cincinnati here, but it'll be something we have to wait and see. Cincinnati also running with some younger guys in the secondary right now, one of them being Jordan Battle. Jordan Battle is also playing fairly well. He's one of the top 15 graded rookies in the class right now. So he's playing well. That'll be a key matchup for him for sure, too. And definitely an interesting thing to watch as this one plays out for sure.
Yeah.
Hi, Kat. Bengals. We talked about the Bengals. All right. Next game on the list. Tends to be a growing theme for us here is that I guess we're pretty high on the Broncos.
Yeah, I guess so.
Like. So we're actually both leaning on this one too. Denver heading into LA to take on the division rival Chargers. The Chargers are 2.5 to 3-point favorites here. We were looking at them about 2.5. We still liked it, and I would imagine that we still like it at 3. The game total for this one also at 44 total points. V, I'll let you break into this one. What are you seeing with this matchup that is leaning you towards the Broncos covering as road dogs?
Yeah, I think this is a third straight week where I have both the Broncos covering the points and the under in the Broncos game. Didn't totally work out for us last week in terms of covering the 3.5, but I think it was the right process, and I think obviously they had a chance there at the end of the game to not only cover the points but win outright as they had the ball in the red zone with a few seconds left, just were not able to get it in there. Again, you just have to start with this. Denver defense has been fantastic recently. They sacked CJ Stroud 5 times last week. They forced a couple fumbles that just did not bounce their way. If they were able to recover that one deep in Houston's territory, it could have been a different ball game. Unfortunately, did not bounce their way. But overall, this defense has been great. They have allowed 22 or fewer points in 7 straight games. Now they're going up against a Chargers offense that is in shambles right now. Over their last 3 games, they have scored 36 total points, including just 6 last week to the Patriots, as we mentioned earlier. This defense is as good or better than any of the defenses the Chargers have faced over their last 3 weeks, including the Packers, Ravens, and Patriots. This Chargers offense just does not do anything well right now outside of Justin Herbert. Specifically, their rushing game has been very anemic. They've rushed for less than 100 yards in 8 of their 12 games this season, including 5 of their last 6. We saw last week that the Texans had quite a bit of success on the ground last week with Dameon Pierce, a little bit of a shock watching that game that they were able to have as much success. If the Chargers can't come anywhere close to that, then they really have no chance because they have no playmakers at wide receiver outside of Keenan Allen that you can trust. Quentin Johnston just keeps dropping footballs that hit him right in the chest. Joshua Palmer is injured. We know Mike Williams is out. They just don't have anybody who you can trust, even though Justin Herbert is doing everything he can. So I think this is an easy outright win for the Broncos. So getting them at plus points is fantastic. And then I have no idea how this total is at 44 points. I mean, where are we getting to 44 points? This Chargers team cannot score the football right now. They're barely getting to 10 or 12 points per game in their last 3. So easy under, easy Denver cover for me. I don't know why Oddsmakers are not higher on the Broncos given some of these easy matchups they've had recently. I mean, being 1.5 point favorites over the Broncos or the Browns a couple of weeks ago was insane. Being 2.5 point dogs to these Chargers, I think, is also insane.
Yeah, and this is another one of those trends where odds makers seem to be pretty slow to pick it up and understand why bettors are hammering unders. And when you look at what the Chargers have done under in all but 3 games this season, and generally the lines over the last month for their game totals have been around this mark, about 44, 45 points. Like we said last week, it was 38.5 points by close, and that was well after we did our show and took them at 40.5 points. They absolutely plummeted. It continues to go down. I am right there with you, and I expect more of the same. The Broncos are playing extremely well, opportunistic defense, and unfortunately, the Chargers are not in a position right now where their playmakers are doing all they can to help Herbert. And that's actually starting to seep into Herbert's process. You can tell as he starts to press more, throw balls that he shouldn't, throw balls that you go, that's not a Justin Herbert type ball. That's not a Justin Herbert type decision. And it's actually starting to affect this offense negatively in terms
Mm.
of he doesn't know where he can go with the football to gain the yardage that they need. He just knows that he needs yardage. So that's becoming a huge issue for them. And I am right there with you. I'm actually, frankly, a little bit surprised that odds makers gave them the full 3 here, especially given what happened last week. 6-0 is one of the worst games I think I've ever heard of in the last maybe 5-10 years.
Getting
That's
that
a
total at 39.5 was a godsend. I saw that late in the week. I was like, oh, might as well just hit this one.
easy, right? Easiest money on the line all week, probably easily. So that
Yep.
that wraps that one up. The next game we're looking at on the list here, the Minnesota Vikings head into Vegas to take on the Raiders. The Vikings 3 point favorites on the road. But what we're targeting here is the game total, which is set at 40.5. I know you're liking a pick on this one. Which way are you leaning with that game total here?
Yeah, I'm liking the over at 40.5 in this game. We have the return of Justin Jefferson for the Minnesota Vikings this week. It has been reported earlier that he was a full participant and he will be playing in this one. Now you get the receiving combination of Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson. That is one of the best groups you can get in this league. I know Josh Dobbs struggled in his last game, that Monday nighter against the Bears, 4 interceptions, but I think he should have a much better outing against this Las Vegas defense. The Raiders defense in their last 4 games against teams not including the Giants and the Jets are allowing an average of 26.75 points per game. They have allowed over 250 passing yards in 4 of their last 5 games. They had to release Marcus Peters because he just was not putting in enough effort. So that he was a starter for them. So now they're going to have to resort to backups. Not a good situation for their defense. I think it should be pretty easy for this Minnesota team to be able to score in the mid 20s in this one, given how much how good their receiving core is and how poor this Vegas defense is. On the flip side, Aiden O'Connell once again starting for the Raiders. He has not been terrible this year. He's put up some decent numbers. He's thrown for over 200 yards on 4 of his 5 starts, including 271 passing yards against the Dolphins and 248 passing yards against the Chiefs. Those are 2 very good secondaries, so he was able to move the ball against those guys. Obviously, it helps when you have guys like Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers to catch the ball. But if he can get into the 14 to 17 point range for this Raiders offense, I think this game should go over the total pretty easily. Seems like this game is going to end up being around 27-17 or so in Minnesota's favor. So should clear the total relatively easily, in my opinion. I think just good enough offense by Minnesota to get this one done.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that you bring up a great spot where Justin Jefferson is back. And that's going to definitely be something that is ID'd heavily in the Raiders secondary room. Their cornerbacks are definitely going to know that Jay
Mm-hmm.
Jetta is back. And I think that that in turn also opens up opportunities for Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison has played spectacularly this season without a ton of help, with a backup quarterback, without other people drawing coverage away from him. And he is still playing very, very well. He is one of the best receivers from this class, and he's proving it over and over. And I think that this could be an opportunity for him to excel and really take advantage of a, you know, less than favorable Raiders secondary, I guess is a good way to put it. They have a very, very low graded secondary. I won't break into it, but it is one of the worst in the NFL. And a lot of it comes down to, like we said, Marcus Peters was not playing very well. He was let go, and now they're running with Jack Jones, 46 total coverage grade. Amik Robertson, 57.3 total coverage grade. That's 87th out of 119 qualifying corners. And Trevon Moehrig hasn't been terribly great in the secondary as well. So they are littered with holes back there. And I think that this is going to be a good opportunity. As much as everybody was shocked, or maybe they weren't shocked, but I was at least slightly surprised that he threw 4 interceptions against Bears. I think that this is going to be a much more, baseline performance
Yeah.
there for Josh Dobbs. And I think that the Vikings, as much as they were questioning if they were going to move away from the
Yeah, that
guy
was a
that they traded
bizarre situation.
for,
Who would you move on from if you were the Vikings? I mean, it was one bad game. You can't
right?
move
Who
away from Dobbs after that. That was very
who
weird.
are you going to take? Who are you
Yeah.
going to go pick up off the street? So that was a little bit questionable. I think they made the right decision by obviously staying with him. I think we'll see more of the kind of above replacement level type play that we've seen from Josh Dobbs thus far this season. So I'm excited to watch it happen too. It's going to be an interesting matchup in the late window there. But we have a bunch of games in the late window. There are some really, really good ones. So I
Yeah.
won't be shocked if a lot of people don't necessarily catch it. But the next game we have on the list is probably going to be a bit of a banger. I'm going to be honest. The Seahawks played very well last week, but I think they're coming up against a different beast here in San Francisco. As they travel to San Francisco, they are 13 to 13 and a half point underdogs. And I'm siding with the Niners. Shocker. San Francisco is debatably coming off the most impressive and convincing victories of the entire 2023 season when they beat Philly 42-19 in Philly. And I took an L on this one, thinking that the Eagles were going to keep this game close. And it was out of hand early, absolutely out of hand early. In
One of
a
the most
big
enjoyable wins in our head-to-head over the last couple of years I've experienced. It was very enjoyable.
I bet. I absolutely bet. And you know what? A good point is that it came down to exactly what you said too, V, that this Philly secondary is in trouble right now, and it shows. In Seattle, they're not much better in the secondary. Philly is one of the top three, or I shouldn't say top three, bottom three worst secondaries in EPA per dropback since November. Seattle, not much better. They are 23rd in EPA per dropback since November. And I understand. I get that Seattle may have taken Dallas to the brink last week. They only lost late in the game. They lost 41-35. It was a really good game, really close game. But this Niners team is an entirely different beast. And this same Hawks team got crushed by them in just a couple of weeks ago, 31-13. So I am unsurprised by it. When we look at San Francisco, they are scoring 33 points per game over the last three. That's second most in the NFL. They're only allowing 15.3 opposing points per game. That is fourth fewest in the NFL. They are top to bottom, the best roster in the NFL right now. And Seattle has defensive issues abound, and we don't talk about it enough. I think they have the worst EPA per rush allowed since November. And if anybody knows what Seattle does well, or I mean, what San Francisco does well, it's give Christian McCaffrey the ball and let him do what he does best. He's set up for another absolutely obscene game, but I don't think that that's where the value in the props market for this game lies. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is going to have a great game. Your grandma could tell me that Christian McCaffrey is going to have a great game, and she doesn't even know who he has to play. What I see as a huge value in this one, though, is another running back they don't really talk about, or maybe we can't call him a running back, but Deebo Samuel, who has played well on the ground, has a pair of rushing touchdowns over the last two. And right now, you can get his anytime touchdown at plus 115 and only 12 and a half rushing yards against one of the league's worst rushing defenses right now. He's hit both of those numbers in each of the last two. I would 100% expect Kyle Shanahan to go back to the well with Deebo. I'd expect maybe even a season high in carries for Deebo in this one, to give Christian a little bit of break, as I don't think this game is going to be anywhere close and even needing them to give Christian a massive number of carries. So that's why when you look at a number like 108, which is Christian McCaffrey's line for rushing yards right now, and I think his anytime touchdown was obscene. It was like minus 300 or
Oh my
something
goodness.
anytime touchdown. I was like, oh, that's all right. We'll just go with plus 2 touchdowns. It's like 114 or something like that. It was not a good value. So everybody knows that he's going to have a good game. That's why the lines are juiced, and you're not going to get any good values there. Definitely target elsewhere. And I think that Deebo is a great opportunity for that. Like I said, this game's not going to be anywhere close. They're going to need somebody to take some touches there at the end. And I think Deebo's going to end up being definitely well in the mix on the ground for sure. This is still going to be a pretty good game, as the Seahawks don't just kind of go away, but the Niners are an entirely different beast. What have you made of these two teams recently?
Well, we should probably start off with saying there has been some big injury news in this game recently, late in this week. Geno Smith dealing with a groin injury in the back half of this week. The line moved from minus 11 to minus 13 in San Fran's favor, so it's looking like there's a realistic chance that we're going to see Drew Lock in this game rather than Geno Smith. So that makes your pick even better with San Fran and the points. You know, we've seen enough of Drew Lock in this league to know what he can and can't do. And obviously, there's a lot that he cannot do in the NFL. So, regardless of who's out there at quarterback, you just got to pretty much take the Niners in this one, because they're just better at every facet of this game, better offensively, better defensively. there's just really nothing you can do to stop this San Francisco offense. They just, you try to stop McCaffrey, they can throw it over your head to Debo. You try to stop George Kittle, they can throw it to Brandon Ayuk. They can do whatever they want whenever they want. So yeah, definitely all over San Fran, and the points makes a ton of sense. And then yeah, the Debo pick on the rushing yards, love that as well. I had him over the receiving yards last week, and that one hit because he was able to break a couple long ones. But his receptions are usually very close to the line of scrimmage, so you're expecting him to do a lot of his work after the catch. But with the rushing play at such a low number, even with one or two carries, he can break that easily because, again, they just create so much space and do so much damage with their motion that it's very easy to pick up, 20, 25 yards with a single carry when you have a guy like Debo in the back there. So, yeah, all signs point to San Fran in this game. And again, tough loss for Seattle last week because, if you were able to pull that one out, you were going to give yourself a realistic chance to make the playoffs. But with that loss and, you know, this game against San Fran next week, you have to play the Eagles, looking like a very tough road for them to make the playoffs this year.
And you bring up a great point that this team without Geno, it's just a non-starter, frankly. And that's a weird thing to say that I never thought I would have said maybe a handful of years ago or even at the beginning of this year. This team without Geno is a non-starter. I don't know if it's my previous experiences with Drew Lock, but watching Drew Lock go into that game and perform as poorly as he did, that Geno kind of had to muscle it up and come back is I felt bad for the dude because it was actually very, very tough to watch. It was tough to watch football. It's tough to understand how you can continue to gain opportunities like that, having played as abysmally as you had in those opportunities. And it sucks for the Seattle team, who does have decent playmakers abound that
I saw
are
what DK did last week. That dude's a beast.
DK Metcalf is absolutely unguardable when he wants to be. And if he were to get, one of these top 5 quarterbacks in the league, I think we'd be talking about DK being legitimately one of the best top, 3 to 5 receivers in the NFL.
Yep.
Absolutely. So this is going to be another interesting one to watch. And I think that even at 13, this number to me is going to continue to move higher.
Yeah.
So if you're shopping this game, get in before it gets over 14. So you'll have that nice break on the key number at 14. And maybe look elsewhere in terms of like Seattle total points scored in the under, 16 to 17 range. And that could be another decent value if you do end up missing out on this line here at under 14. So that's where I'm shopping it as we move forward in the week. But now we head to the matchup of the week, a rematch of another insane game we saw a couple weeks ago. Philly heads into Dallas to take on the Cowboys. Philly +3 in the hook on the road. Game total for this one, 51.5. And this is another game that I'm targeting the total on. But unlike most of my totals that get over 50, and I'm 90% of the time going to lean under because games scoring that high are just not in abundance in the NFL when good teams meet up. This one is not so much. I'm leaning at the over 51.5. And the big reason why is obviously because this Dallas Cowboys offense is looking like one of the best, I should say one of the best, maybe the best offense in the NFL right now. 32.3 points per game. That's tops in the league. They're 39.7 points per game over their last 3. And they have scored 40 plus in 4 of their last 6. Let that sink in. 40 plus in 4 of their last 6. That is an insane number of points. We know how well their defense plays. Now, Seattle may have figured something out last week. 35 points scored. So that's going to be something to watch moving forward. And we've just got done talking about what Seattle has. I think that the Eagles have a really, really good opportunity to right the ship offensively after we've already talked about how bad their last performance was. And a lot of that coming down to that secondary, who has allowed 31 points per game over their last 3. That is second worst in the NFL. Let that sink in. One of the best records in the NFL has the second worst points per game allowed over their last three. I think that tells you pretty much everything you need to know about which way this Philly team is trending. San Francisco got absolutely everything they wanted, 42-19. We talked about that a bit already. The other thing that I want to touch on here is the last time that these two teams played, it was not that long ago. Week 9, Philly won 28-23 at home, goes over, or it had 51 total points, which is kind of why they leaned this one at 51 and a half. I think that's mild, frankly, compared to how Philly has played defensively over their last two. Both of their last two games have gone well over 60 points. We talked about the San Francisco game, and you can talk about how they had 37-34 against Buffalo, over 51 points in 4 of their last 6 as well. So if we put that together with the 40 plus scored by Dallas over their last 4, I understand these teams hate each other. They're going to be a little bit more amped up for this one, but I think 51 points is a very reasonable number given these offenses, and specifically the matchup between the Dallas passing game in the Philly secondary. It's going to be abysmal. It's going to be tough to watch, especially if you're a Philly fan. I'm sorry. You guys still have a lot to play for, but this is going to be a tough one to watch. I think it's still going to end up being a close game, as Philly's not just going to go away. They're going to control the ball when they can. And it's not like A.J. Brown forgot how to play football. He is absolutely phenomenal. Him versus Sharon Bland is going to be an insane matchup that I cannot wait to watch. It's going to be the matchup probably of the week, and the positional matchup of the week, in the game of the week. I just can't wait to watch this one. V, you could probably tell that I'm giddy with how
Yeah.
fast I'm talking, much I'm, But is there anything that you're seeing in this one that has you excited?
Yeah, this should be a fantastic matchup, and it's hard to see this game not going over the total and getting closer to 60 points in this one. You said it all. I mean, these defenses are just abysmal right now, especially in the secondary. We saw what Philly has done the last couple of weeks. They got torched by Josh Allen, got torched by Brock Purdy the last 2 weeks. The Cowboys, though, kind of in the same place. They get torched by Geno Smith last week. He had 4 total touchdowns. Jalen Hurts had his way with them when he played against the Cowboys a few weeks ago. Purdy also had his way when he played them at the beginning of the season. Anytime they're going up against these above average quarterbacks, their defense is just not really able to do much of anything to slow them down, despite having such a great pass rush up front. These quarterbacks, these elite quarterbacks, are learning how to get the ball out very quickly, so nullifying that great pass rush you have with Micah Parsons and Demarcus Ware up front, or Demarcus Lawrence, sorry, up front. So yeah, lots and lots of points in this one. Definitely you see the over hitting in this one. Probably also leaning towards the Eagles and the points in this one, just because getting the hook is very tough to pass up on when you have a team as good as Philadelphia. I know they got blown out last week, but you know we've seen it all year with Dallas. They're just it's you can't assume they're on the same level as a team like San Francisco, because they have not proven it against quality opposition. Beating up on the Giants twice, beating up on the Jets, the Patriots, the Commanders, all these low level teams. As great as it is, it does not mean anything until you've beaten good teams. So getting 3 and the hook feels a little presumptuous to me. It seems like it's just too many points. This game should come right down to the wire. Should be 3 points either way, in my opinion. Meaning, if you're getting 3 and the hook with Philadelphia, very difficult to pass up. So that's probably where I'm going to be leaning. But I also like the over in this one, just like you said.
Well, and this is another sentiment that we talked about. It's not necessarily a one-for-one comparison either, but when we looked at if you go back to what we were talking about when the Niners and the Cowboys matched up, we talked about it lean towards the Niners, and it was because both of these teams, while good, the Niners are in a tier of their own right
Yep.
now. And I continue to think that when I see both these teams match up, while the Eagles floundered against the Niners, I don't see that being the exact same case against the Cowboys, as this hook is a very, very valuable piece to them right now. I completely agree that 3.5 in the hook. I'm a little hesitant with how poorly they did play, obviously,
Yep.
but it's a completely different situation and a completely different level of opposition for them right now. And I think that the hook will definitely come in handy in this one. It's going to be very, very close and a hell of a game to watch. I can't wait for it
And
to
one
happen.
thing for Philadelphia that even though they got blown out last week is that they're not turning the ball over. So if you're not going to turn the ball over, you can still stay in the game. And when Dallas has as many holes as they do on defense, they should be able to stay in this one, even if Dallas's offense plays well. But have to look at the positives for them. They're not turning the ball over, even against a great San Fran defense last week.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And on to the last game of the slate here. The Monday Night Football matchup. We have the Tennessee Titans heading into Miami to take on the Dolphins. And wow, the Dolphins have looked good recently. They are 13-point favorites at home against Tennessee. Total for this one, 46.5 points. And I'm right there. I think Oddsmakers hit this one on the head in terms of maybe not going too high for Miami and get some people to, bet on Tennessee faultily, frankly, if in my opinion. But when we look at this one, Tennessee, worst road team in the NFL by a country mile. It is a theme we have talked about ad nauseum on this show. Over their last few games, or excuse me, over their road games this season, they are 1-5 against the spread. That is dead last. They have 12.3 points per game scored. That is also dead last. And they have allowed 23.4 opposing points per game while on the road. That is 13th worst in the NFL. Right there, middling towards the bottom third of the league. And Miami's back clicking. And a big reason why is this defense.
Yep.
That is not something I think a lot of us expected, seeing how high powered the offense was early on in the season. Their D is playing absolutely phenomenal. Over their last three, they've allowed 13.7 opposing points per game. That's second in the NFL. They are the best EPA per dropback defense over that span, and the third best EPA per run over that span, which also gives them the best overall defense in EPA per play over the last three games. I do not see a universe where Will Levis in this Tennessee team can muster to keep this game within 2 scores. We're at a 13-point line, which to me is more than enough value, and you can take it up to 14 and even probably past 14, but I absolutely love it at 13. And for me, another big reason why I love this, we've already talked about how good they are offensively. And this is a huge, huge mismatch for Tennessee, who is abysmal at corner. They have struggled keeping guys down, and now they come against potentially the best tandem in the NFL in Jalen Waddle and Cheetah, who are just absolutely killing it right now. When you go and look at their lines, though, in prop land, you're not probably going to want to go that direction, as Tyreek is looking at over 108 yards
That's
as his
crazy.
line through the air, one of the biggest lines for a single player I've ever seen. And on the other side, Jalen Waddle is not necessarily getting a discount, as he is still up over 77-ish yards, which is still an incredibly high number. But what I do think falls in line here is a nice Tua over on passing touchdowns, which is generously set over at FanDuel at 2.5 passing touchdowns. The key, we talk about this all the time, but specifically when we talk about passing touchdowns in terms of shopping around, it's super important because of the way that these lines set. You're either at 1.5 or you're at 2.5.
Yep.
There's no in betweens there. And what that means a lot of the times is, if say you want to go over on passing touchdowns and it's at 1.5, you're getting an abysmal odds. You're at like minus 150 or minus 180 or just something really not a huge value for you. As soon as you shop around and find some of these books that are teetering at 2.5 and 1.5, you're going to see much more improved odds. At 2.5 passing touchdowns, we can get Tua at plus 140. You can mix that with his passing yardage totals or even the rushing yardage totals from these backs in this game, and you can have a nice little parlay there. I know that Tua has only hit 3 or more touchdowns in 4 games this season, but Tennessee has allowed 2 or more in 3 of their last 4 against far lesser offenses, Tampa Bay, Jacksonville, and Indianapolis. With that being said, I think that it's a shoo-in that the Tua and the Miami Dolphins could put up 3 passing touchdowns in the first half and skate this one off fairly easily. And that can include that they target their backs. Their backs are extremely elusive with the football. So even when this game is out of hand, he can still have the potential to throw that touchdown to an underneath route where a guy takes it for 6. And Tua specifically, is catered for that because he has a few of the best run after catch guys in the NFL in the backfield and at wide receiver, given Jalen Waddle is one of the fastest receivers. And we already know what Tyreek Hill is. Tyreek Hill is an absolute cheat code human joystick mechanic that we can't seem to figure out, and defenses lose sleep over. So with that being said, I'm liking the over at 2.5 passing touchdowns, and I'm absolutely loving Miami anywhere at a under 2 touchdown line, and I'll still probably take them over 2 touchdowns. With this matchup, though, I know that you're in on this one too with Miami. What are you highlighting in this one?
Yep, right there with you. I got it at Miami minus 13.5. I think that's you just got to take that one. Hard to pass up. Significantly better team compared to Tennessee. We know the kind of tear that this Dolphins team is on right now. They are 9-3 in those 9 games. Their average margin of victory is 14.6 points, and that's if you take out the 50-point margin of victory against the Broncos. I took that out because that's looking like an outlier. But even if you take that one out, they are still winning on average by 14.6 points per game. Last week, they beat the Commanders by 30 points. The week before that, they beat the Jets by 21. So definitely on a roll right now. But like you said, it's their defense that is really, really playing super well right now. Since Jalen Ramsey came back, their last 5, they have allowed 17 or fewer offensive points. It's going to be very tough for Will Levis to do anything against this defense, even though he's done some nice things as a rookie. And you also said it, Tennessee's defense, not very good. They have just 10 takeaways on the season, tied for second fewest. They have just 3 interceptions. They have allowed 20-plus points in 9 of 12 games this year, and they have allowed 31-plus points in 2 of their last 3. And Jeffrey Simmons has not practiced this week with a knee injury, clearly their best player on defense. So if he is out, it's going to be an incredible day for Raheem Mostert and Devin Achane. They should both be able to get into the end zone if he is out for this one. So keep an eye out for that injury report, because this is a Monday night game, so the final injury report comes out on Saturday. So keep an eye out on that one. But regardless, love the Dolphins in this one.
And very reasonable rushing totals for both of those guys as well. So definitely make sure you can go and shop those. Also, you can pair those with your, Tua passing touchdowns or your insane Tyreek over 180, passing or receiving yards. So I'm right there with you. I completely agree. And this is going to be, frankly, I don't know how this one made it on a Monday Night Football slate, but I guess
double header Monday night too. Not great scheduling by the league.
Not terribly fantastic scheduling by the league. But yeah, and I'm right there with you. And I think another thing that needs to be questioned throughout this one is what is up with the connection between Will Levis and DeAndre Hopkins, where it looked like it was really well. You can see them arguing on the sideline last week, to which point DeAndre Hopkins kind of shut down and didn't really.
They bounced back, though. I'll give them credit. They had a very late touchdown connection to force the game to overtime, so I'll give them credit. But, definitely still something to keep an eye out.
That is definitely true, and hopefully it is more of just, sideline things. Guys get over it.
Right.
That hasn't necessarily been the case in DeAndre Hopkins' tenure across the league, as he's tend to have some issues with some of his quarterbacks over the last few, but that's kind of more narrative analysis than anything there. But yep, all in all, I think everybody go ahead, take the Dolphins. And this is going to be the easiest one. You probably don't even have to watch this one. You're just going to wake up and see a nice little 38-13 score and be well happy about it.
Absolutely.
All right. And V, another week in the books, my friend. That wraps us for week 14. Back same time next week, everybody, 8 p.m. Eastern. Check us out, importantnonsense.com. That's where you can check out all of the IN team's work over there. And that's how you can become a member, get into our Discord. That's where you can ask us all the questions that your heart desires. If we didn't break down any of the games you're interested in this week, hit us up in there. We're happy to give you our picks and break it down. We pretty much do that for any of the big primetime matchups. Obviously, we get a lot of questions surrounding those, especially in recent weeks. I appreciate all you guys in the Discord that are asking us questions. Keep doing it. We love answering them. We love making money with you guys and breaking down these games. And of course, if you guys want any IN merch to help support us, we very, very much would appreciate it. Promo code LOCK to get a nice little bonus for that. And yeah, V, that about does it for us. Do you have any parting words for the folks at home?
Should be a fantastic weekend of football. Obviously, we talked about Philly and Dallas, but we somehow didn't even touch Bills Chiefs. Again, that should be another fantastic game. Oddsmakers did a very good job setting the lines on that one, so didn't feel comfortable taking either the point spread or the total, but should be a fantastic game to watch in the late window. So just a great day of football coming up for everybody on Sunday.
In a little teaser, I know that we're cooking up a little something, maybe some props for that one too. So definitely get in our Discord and hit us up about that one. Get some props for that game. It'll be a lot of fun. You're absolutely right. That one's going to be a banger. There's a lot of good games on the slate this week. I can't wait to watch it. And I can't wait to make some money with you, buddy. And until next time, everybody, good night and good luck.